Hey guys, this video is going to show you how I make these picket pumpkins with about 5 minutes of work apiece. Fall is a huge opportunity for you to sell your woodworking. This is a fast and easy project that I'm going to be making for my small business this fall. The first thing I really like about these pumpkins is that I can use some of that scrap wood I've been hoarding. The pumpkins you see me making in this video are left over from cedar and pine pickets that I've used for other projects in the past. The only thing I had to purchase for this was some extra paint, which I got from Lowe's for about $5 a can. So to make these, we're going to start at the miter saw and cut the pumpkins to the desired final height. If you are using a full-length picket, I'd recommend making them in sizes of 17-inch, 12-inch, and 6-inch for each set. This will leave enough material for you to make 2 full sets out of 1 picket. This build actually uses the dog ears at the top of the picket, so be sure not to cut that off. Measure out your desired lengths and cut the pickets to each size. If you want to do any sanding, now's the best time. I went over each of these with 40 grit sandpaper just to knock off the roughest spots. Now, let's head back to the miter saw and set it to 45 degrees. We're gonna now put dog ears on every corner of each picket. To get consistent ears, I lined each cut up with this point on my saw. You can also just put a line on your saw to match up the edge to for each cut. Once those are all prepared, we'll add the saw lines down the face at the table saw. I experimented with putting these lines on after painting, thinking it would pop more and have more contrast, but it didn't end up working out very well, so I'd recommend putting them on now. Use one of the pickets to gauge the height to set your saw to. In the end, it should be about 1/4 inch to 3/8 of an inch high for the best look. The next step is to find the exact middle of your picket, which can be a little harder than it sounds. A standard picket is 5.5 inches, so the middle is at 2.75 inches. However, if you set your saw to 2.75, the line it creates is not going to be perfectly down the middle. Most saw blades are 1/8 of an inch thick, so to account for that, we need to come back 1/16 of an inch so it's in the middle of the blade. To do this, set your saw to 2 3/4, but then come back by 1/16 of an inch to account for half that saw blade width. So your saw should now be set to 2 11/16. Do a quick visual check just to make sure it looks pretty centered before you run the board through. Start with your smallest board, run the line down, check to make sure it looks good. If you need to make an adjustment, now's the perfect time. Then run the rest of your boards through once you're satisfied. Now set the saw to 1 5/16 of an inch and run each board through twice, flipping it between cuts. You should end up with your boards looking like this and ready for paint. Grab the spray paint colors you've chosen and head to a well-ventilated area. I have to move outside of my fence for this step, or my dog will try to help. Apply a layer of paint to each one. I use these little paint stands so I can get both sides and the edges in one step. Keep in mind the lighter colors like white could take a second coat to get perfect coverage. At this step, I tried to make one of mine reversible so that it was orange on one side and white on the other. But in the end, this didn't really work out. It was difficult to avoid overspray, so the edges weren't as clean as I'd hoped, so I would just stick to one color for each pumpkin. Once those were painted, I headed back to the shop to make the stems. Find some scrap picket that you have laying around and run it through the table saw to get a 1 1/4 inch strip. At the miter saw, cut 30-degree angles onto the ends to make your stems. You could also use paint for the stem, but I ended up staining it with dark walnut. Let the stain and the paint dry for a couple of hours. The final step is to assemble the stem and the pumpkins. This is easiest done with 2 types of glue. I use this CA glue as a clamp by adding a dot to each end of the stem. Then use your traditional wood glue, like Titebond 3, in the middle for long-term holding power. Line up the stem at the middle, push it on, and hold it for about 30 seconds. This will give the CA glue time to set and give you the holding power, and the wood glue will set over time. Allow everything to dry, and then you're ready to sell. These can be sold locally, but are also a pretty good candidate to ship because they're so compact. I've got about $2 of materials and 15 minutes in each of these sets, so I'm going to be listing them for $25 in my area. I'll pin a comment below if that number gets updated up or down in the future. If you are going to sell these, remember that differentiation is key if your market starts getting saturated. You can do this with size, color, customization, and many other ways. Find which way you like making them and do what works for you. If you found this video helpful and want to learn more about customization of products, you might enjoy this video where I show you how I use a laser in my woodworking business. More fall smalls are on the way, so be sure to subscribe to not miss out.